Are you all ready for the class? Okay. Do you remember what we have learned in the last class? Very good. What is the title of the lesson we are learning now? Dear Mrs. Naidu. And what is Mrs. Naidu refers here? Very good. Who is she? Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. She was a great poet as well as she was a famous patriotist, isn't it? She fought for the freedom struggle of our nation. And who is the writer of this lesson? Madangi Subramanian. She is an Indian writer. She is from Tamil Nadu. Okay? And what else we have learned? A small girl, a village girl, she is like you, isn't it? She is writing a letter to this Mrs. Naidu. Now she is no more. Why is she writing this letter? Because it's an assignment for her. Who gave that assignment? Animus. Animus is her new teacher, isn't it? And an important thing that Animus taught them, what is that? She dislikes memorizing everything. Memorizing everything is like parrot. We should develop our skills. We should grow our heart. We should interact with the society. We should do something, social changes in our society. This is what this Animus is expecting from the students, isn't it? Then what else we have seen? This little girl, what is the name of this little girl? Sarojini. And Sarojini's mother dislikes her writing a letter to Mrs. Naidu. Why? Because Mrs. Naidu is already dead. So she is writing a letter to a dead person. I have asked you on that day, to whom are you liking to write a letter? To whom you will write a letter? Who are you like the most to write a letter? Is it your friend? Or any other famous personality do you like to write? How many of you have decided to write a letter to anybody, maybe to your friends or to any famous person just like this little kid? Okay. Then this Sarojini's mother did not allow her to write a letter to this dead person, and what she did? She said, it's my school assignment and so I should write. And her Annie teacher asked all the students to write a letter about whom they want to learn more. And this Sarojini decides to write a letter to Mrs. Naidu. And she used the word conclude. I concluded to write a letter to you. This word conclusion she got from, she understands from so many detective stories. And she is saying the first difference between her and Mrs. Naidu that she is alive, she is living now, but this Mrs. Naidu is no more. This is what we have seen in the last class, isn't it? Do you all remember? Let's see what happened next, okay? Now, this Sarojini is saying that, I'm sorry, I don't know the polite manner to say that you are dead. Because last class we have seen that Sarojini, this little girl is saying that there is only one difference between you and me. What is that? I am alive, I am living, today I am alive, but you are dead. Just like that she said you are dead. It's not a polite manner, isn't it? So now she is saying that, she is writing that I don't know the exact way. I don't know the polite manner to say that you are dead. You are no more. So she is requesting, she is asking pardon to her that I don't know the polite manner to say that you are dead. Now, again this little girl is saying a difference between herself and Mrs. Naidu. When Mrs. Naidu was a 12 years old girl, just like her, just like the Sarojini. She has written a poem. Who wrote a poem? Mrs. Sarojini Naidu when she was 12. When she was a small girl, she wrote a poem that is especially in English language, and it's a long poem. It's not a poem, short poem just like 4 or 5 lines. It's a long poem and it has thousands of lines, which means it's a lengthy poem. It's a long poem. Who wrote this long poem? Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. At the age of 12, now our little girl Sarojini is writing. We can call this little girl as Saro, okay? This Saro is writing a letter to Mrs. Naidu at the age of 12, isn't it? She is saying that at my age, when you are at my age, when Mrs. Naidu was at the age of this little girl Saro, she wrote a long poem and it is in English. It's an amazing thing to our Saro because our Saro is feeling a little bit difficult to learn this English language, and she is mesmerizing, she is surprised, she is excited that this Sarojini has written a long poem, not a short poem, a long poem at the age of 12, and that too in English. And again she is saying that Mrs. Sarojini Naidu was the topper in Madras University matriculation exam. Once upon a time, during those days, before 50 years, these universities will conduct all these matriculation exams. And this Mrs. Sarojini Naidu was the topper in that Madras University. It's not like a school, it's a university. It consists of so many schools will be there, and this Mrs. Sarojini Naidu was the topper. It was a great achievement for her. And our Saro is saying that first she is saying that at the age of 12 you have written a long poem. It's a lengthy poem, that too in English. It was a mesmerizing thing for me. And the next is, you are the topper in Madras University matriculation exam. And our Saro is saying that I am also the topper in my school for the 5th grade examination. Last year, now she is in the 6th standard, just like you, isn't it? She is saying that, okay, you are the topper in Madras University matriculation exams and the topper in my school for the 5th grade examination. That is a comparison between us. She has won that great level, that university exam, that is matriculation exam, and now I am the topper in the 5th grade examination. Again she is saying that Mrs. Naidu has fought for India's freedom, isn't it? Already we have learned about Mrs. Naidu, and there we have learned that Mrs. Naidu was a freedom fighter. She is not only a poet but also a freedom fighter. So she is saying that you fought against the Britishers. That is a thing to be appreciated. If I were in your place, if I fought with them, with the Britishers, I could have not won. Why? Because she is saying that these Britishers, they have so many spies, so many detectives with them. Why this little girl is often using this word detective? Because this little girl is fond of reading detective stories. What kind of stories do you like to read, children? Do you like to read fantasy stories, folk tales, legends, myths, or science fiction? You may have your own interest, isn't it? Some of you may like fantasy stories, some of you may like fables, some of you may like science fiction, some of you may like horror. So this Saro she's having more interest towards detective stories. Okay. And again, 3 or 4 times she is using the word detective. detective, just like detective stories, these Britishers have so many spies within them. And so, if I tried to fight against the Britishers, I might have not won. But you fought against them and you won the match, won the battle. This is what this little girl Sarojini is saying about Mrs. Naidu. What are the three things? The first is, at the age of 12, she is writing a letter, but Mrs. Naidu has written a long poem in English. And the next is, Mrs. Naidu was the topper in Madras University matriculation exam, and our little Saro was the topper in her 5th grade exam. And the third is, Mrs. Naidu fought against the Britishers and she won. She is saying, our Saro is saying that if I fight against them, sometimes I may not win. These are the major 3 differences she is saying continuously about herself and Mrs. Naidu. Have you all understood up to this? Now, our little Saro is comparing herself with Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. And she is saying that Mrs. Sarojini Naidu's house have a number of maids with them. Maids, servants. They have servants for cooking, for cleaning the house, for watering the plants. They have so many maids in their house to take care. And our Saro is saying that you live in a big house. It has so many rooms there. You have so many maids in your house. But I am living in a small house. It's not a house. It's just like a hut. Okay. It has only one room. We are living in a single room. We will cook in one side. We will sleep in one side. Our living room is there. Everything is the same room. Just a single room we have in our house. But Mrs. Naidu's house is very large, very big. It's a very big house. It's a very huge house. And they have so many rooms there in their house and so many maids are there to help them. And she is saying that in my house, my mother is the maid. She will do all the works in my house. So what is she saying? She is comparing. Our little Saro is comparing herself with Mrs. Sarojini Naidu, and she is saying that Mrs. Sarojini Naidu lived in a very big house, very large house. It's like a bungalow. And I am living in a small house, very small. It's like a hut. We have only one. It's a single room house. And you have so many maids in your house. But in my house, my mother is the maid. And then, after comparing all this, she is saying that now I will say why I chose you as the person to write letter. That is my assignment. Why did I choose you? Now, this little girl Sarojini is saying why she chose Mrs. Naidu as the person to whom she is writing a letter. She is saying that Vimala Madam is a lady. In her house, this little girl Saro's mother is working. So who is Vimala Madam? Vimala Madam is the owner. In her house, Saro's mother is working as a maid maybe. Okay. So we do not know what work she is doing in Vimala Madam's house. This Vimala Madam gave a book to Saro's mother. And that book tells about the life history of Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. So, who gave the book? Vimala Madam gave a book to Saro's mother and asked her to hand over that book to our little Saro. So, in that book deals with the life history of Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. And that book was completely in English language. In which language? English language. So, this little girl is saying Vimala ma'am gave me a book to read, and that book is about the life history of life history of Sarojini Naidu, and I'm trying to read that book slowly because the language, the English language used there is very complicated. The words, the vocabularies they used is a little bit tough, a little bit complicated, difficult to understand. And so I am reading it very slowly. Till now I have read only the childhood days of Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. So till now this little girl Sarojini has read only the childhood part, only the first part of the book about Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. Do you know the autobiography of Gandhiji? Do you know the autobiography of Jawaharlal Nehru? All these famous persons have their autobiography. If I am writing about my own life's history, that is autobiography. If somebody else is writing about my life, that is biography. Okay. So, this little girl, Saro, is reading a book which talks about the life history of Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. Okay, and she is saying that the English they used in the text is very hard for me. It's very complicated and I feel very difficult to learn, very difficult to understand the concept there. And then she is saying that I have read the first part in that book, that is your childhood days. And from that book she is pointing out an incident. That is when this little Sarojini Naidu was a little girl. She was from Bengal and the language, their native language is Bengali. And her parents insist her parents compelled her, hereafter you should not speak anything in Bengali, but you should speak in English language. So what does the parents of Sarojini Naidu tell her? They told her that you should speak only in English, not in any other language, especially Bengali. Actually, Mrs. Sarojini Naidu is familiar with so many languages. She knows Urdu, Bengali, Hindi, Marathi, and so many languages. So now her parents are insisting, her parents are compelling her not to speak in Bengali, but to speak in English. And Mrs. Sarojini Naidu disagreed with this point, and so she rushed into her room and she closed the door and she sat there for the whole day. She did not take food in the morning, in the afternoon and in the night. So just her parents said that you can speak only in English. It's a good thing for her or bad? It's good for Mrs. Sarojini, isn't it? But as a child, she did not understand the thing and she just closed the door and she sat inside the room for a whole day. This is not the right manners. This is not the right habit. This is a bad habit, isn't it? Am I saying right? Yes. Closing the door and sat inside and not having the food is completely a bad and worst habit. You should not follow that. Okay? So this Sarojini Naidu did that. Why did she do that? Because she disagreed with the point that her parents insist her to speak only in English, not in Bengali. And our little Saro is saying, if we have so many rooms in my house, in our house, I will also follow the same. I will also shut the door and I'll sat inside that room. I'll not take food. I'll fight with my mother. Is that a good habit? No, this is not the good habit. We should not skip our food. We should not fight with our parents. We should not lock the door and sat inside just like an adamant child. It's not a good behavior, isn't it? You people, you students, don't ever do that. Okay? So, this little girl is saying, if I have so many rooms in my house, I will also do the same. Saro is she is saying that you can understand the young minds. This little girl, Saro, feels so sad as adults, as grown-ups are not understanding these kids completely. At first, she complains about her miss that most of these elders hate asking questions. So again, she is also complaining about her mother that my mother did not allow me to write a letter to you as you are no more, as you are not alive. So now she is saying that elders are not understanding the mind of the young people, but you, Mrs. Sarojini Naidu, I hope you will understand me. You will understand all the questions which are arising in the young mind, which are arising in the mind of the small children. And she is saying that thus I have completed my first assignment. I have introduced myself to you. To whom? To Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. And she completed her first assignment, that is, she introduced herself to Mrs. Naidu in that letter. And she has written, all the best, Sarojini. And then at the last she has written P.S. P.S. refers to postscript. It's like a note. After completing the letter, we can use that postscript. There she mentioned that we have one similarity, that is the first name of mine and the first name of yours is same. That is, this little girl's name is also Sarojini and the first name of our famous person, this poet, is also Sarojini Naidu. For Sarojini Naidu, Sarojini is the first name, isn't it? So, as the postscript, as P.S., she has written, the Saro has written that both of us have a similarity, a same thing, that is, both the first name of ours is same. And thus, she concludes her letter, concludes her first assignment. This is what prescribed for you in this lesson. It's not a small story. It's actually a novel. You have just a piece of that novel. Is that clear, students?
Naidu by Matangi Subramanian. June 10th, 2013. Dear Mrs. Naidu, I guess you're wondering why I'm writing you this letter. Honestly, Mrs. Naidu, so am I. Amma says I'm not allowed to speak to strangers. You would think that also meant that I shouldn't write to them. But since this is a school assignment, she says it's okay. Here is a tip, Mrs. Naidu. If you ever want adults to let you do something, just tell them it is a school assignment. They will 100% agree to it every time. Maybe I should start from the beginning. The beginning was last week. Last week, I started class 6 and I met our new teacher, Annie Miss, who is not like any teacher I have had before. For example, Annie Miss says she doesn't think school should be about memorizing things and saying them back. She says memorizing things and saying them back makes you a parrot, not a person. She says she wants us to grow our brains and our hearts. When she said that, I wanted to ask how our hearts will help us pass our exams and college and get a job and buy a house with a proper roof and maybe even a garden, which are all the reasons why we go to school. But I didn't. You know how adults are, Mrs. Naidu. They don't like questions. Even though it was only the first week of school, Miss gave us an assignment. Miss says that now that we are in 6th standard, it is time for us to be serious. Every teacher says this every year. But none of them ever gave us assignments during the first week of school. So Annie Miss might mean it. The assignment is to write letters to someone we would like to get to know better. She said that we could pick anyone, as long as we explain why. As you have probably concluded, Mrs. Naidu, I picked you. This is the first time I have written the word concluded. It's an English word that means figured out based on clues and evidence. I learned it by reading detective stories. even though our English miss says they are useless rags. I conclude that she is wrong. I understand if you find this confusing, Mrs. Naidu. After all, you and I don't have much in common. For one thing, I am alive and you are, well, you are not. I'm sorry if that was rude, but I've never written to a historical person before. So I don't really know the polite way to say it. Here's another difference between us. When you were 12, which is how old I am now, you wrote a poem that was thousands of lines long, and it was in English. I don't think I could write that many lines in any language. Definitely not in English. Also, when you were 12, you topped the Madras University matriculation exam. I topped our class 5 exams, but I don't think I could top a college exam, even if I studied really, really hard. You fought for India's freedom and won. I've never fought for anything. If I did, I'm not sure if I would win, especially if I was fighting against the Britishers, who have lots of spies and detectives and things that I don't think we have in India. You lived in a huge house with a lot of rooms and maids to do your housework. My house has only one room, and Amma is a maid who does other people's housework. You had a lot of brothers and sisters, and then you had a lot of kids. I don't have any brothers and sisters. I don't have kids either. But you probably concluded that already, since I'm only 12. Here is why I decided to write to you. I'm reading a book about your life. Vimla madam gave it to me, or she gave it to Amma to give to me. I haven't read all of it yet. It's in English, but much more complicated English than the kind they use in detective stories. So it's taking me some time. So far, I've only read the part about your childhood. But that part makes me like you. When you were my age, or even younger, Mrs. Naidu, it seems like you stood up to parents and teachers and all the adults who don't understand anything at all, but act like they do. For example, the book says that your parents wanted you to speak English instead of Bengali. It says you locked yourself in a room for a whole day because you disagreed with them. You didn't even come down for lunch. I don't know if this is true or just a story, but if I had a house with more than one room, there are plenty of times I would have locked myself behind a closed door. I guess that's why you seem like someone who understands kids like me. Like, maybe you wouldn't mind if I asked you questions and read detective stories and stayed at school late so I didn't have to go to Vimla madam's house. And now I have completed my first assignment, which is to introduce myself to the person that I am writing to. To be completely honest, my brain and my heart feel exactly the same as when I started. All the best, Sarojini. P.S. This reminds me of something we do have in common. We have the same first name.